Welcome back. So tonight we are asking, what is the fate of the D-levy? I guess you can call it a troubled levy because it's not really set off. Initially, it was set to be implemented on the 9th of June, which was a week ago, postponed to today, the 16th. Now we're told it's been suspended. I'll be speaking first to the MP for Efija Kwabre North, who happens to be a former Deputy Minister of Energy. He's been very vocal about this. He says the whole thing doesn't make sense. He believes that it was rushed through Parliament and it's not fair to Ghanaians. Later, we'll be joined by the Deputy Minister for Energy, who will be telling us why the government has taken the position it did. We'll follow up with two industry people. But I'd like to remind viewers of what has been said about this levy. So let me take you to an interview I had with the Minister for Energy on radio a week and a half ago. He was explaining why Parliament needed to pass this particular bill to allow for a 1 cedi per litre for petroleum. Here are excerpts of that conversation. Hello, Honorable Jinabo. Are you there? This is the phone now.
I'm there.
You're here. Okay. So we're having a mini debate here. I'm trying to understand what you and Uncle Atu are doing. And so let me tell you what I understand. You can explain. You guys are increasing the fuel price per litre by 1 cedi, and you are saying you are using that to pay some of the debt in the energy sector and buy fuel and then hopefully streamline the energy sector. This is what you say you are doing. Is this correct?
Precisely so.
Okay. Since you are so clear about how much you need, are you also clear about how long you will collect that money? Because you gave us a specific figure as to how much you want to collect. But there doesn't appear to be a sunset clause in what your colleague finance minister presented in Parliament.
Exactly so.
So why not?
Forgive me, my voice. Am I clear?
Yes,
now?
you are clear. So why no sunset clause?
Yes, so what we have done is that we are putting in place some measures. This is an arrangement we've put in place, but we'll keep monitoring the economy. We'll keep monitoring the performance. Don't forget, fuel prices have dropped from about 16. Even with this current 1 cedi, we should be around 12 cedi, which means that you still have a reduction of about 4 cedi. And so what we are doing now is that in the price build-up of the electricity tariff, liquid fuels are not part of the tariff structure. Then what we call reserve margin or capacity is not also part of the tariff structure. If we are to put all that on electricity, then you'll be talking about over 50%. That would be too much. But that would have been the realistic and normal decision to take. But as a government, you have to weigh a lot of options. And we believe that with the recent decrease in petroleum products vis-a-vis the exchange rate performance, this should be a less impactful measure in terms of the hit on Ghanaians, so that we can still sustain and provide electricity to the people of Ghana whilst we take steps to deal with the other issues. It's a governance decision.
Well, for a couple of things, you are very clear on how much the debts you need to pay are, right? And therefore you calculated 1 cedi per litre. Why don't you also tell us when you will stop collecting it? Because the history of this country is that every time an energy sector levy is imposed to pay a debt, more often than not, it never ends.
To clarify this quickly, this amount, if you look at the object clearly, we talk about the debt, where we are, and how unsustainable the debt is. But when you look at the real object, is to help us procure critical fuels, i.e. liquid fuels. And we give the bill of the liquid fuel to be about 1.2 billion. And government says that this 1 cedi would give us about 5 to 6 billion, which is about 60% or 50% of what we require. And so even with this 1 cedi, the finance minister would have to still help us to get some additional money to buy liquid fuels. And so this amount does not necessarily deal with the debt, but to help us procure liquid fuels. As for the debt, we are taking steps. We are renegotiating with the IPPs We are having a payment plan with them so that we stop the bleeding first, reduce the inefficiencies, and turn the sector around. But now we have an immediate challenge, which is how to get liquid fuels in order to continue to sustain the power. So this money effectively helps us to buy liquid fuel.
But in the statement, the finance minister, he also said some of it was going to clear existing debt, correct?
That is the whole levy. Because don't forget that there was a levy before this 1 cedi. And because of the liquid fuels, the existing levy does not help us now to clear the debt. So if we get this to help us with liquid fuel, then part of that levy, which is the existing levy, would help us to clear the debt. So for the sake of clarity, when we say paying the debt, it means that the total energy sector levies.
So welcome back. Minister Jenapo said there are two main reasons. We need to procure fuel and we also need to pay some energy sector debts. Hence the name Energy Sector Shortfall and Debt Repayment Levy. Now, MP for Fija Kwabre North, who I believe is one of the critical committees in Parliament, he's actually a deputy ranking member on the Energy Committee. He says this thing was rushed. He doesn't think it makes sense. Honorable, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Are you saying that as deputy ranking member of the Energy Committee, you did not see at all the memorandum for this law you are calling the D-levy?
Well, let me say good evening to yourself and your viewers. I only got to see the memorandum after the speaker had referred the bill to the Committee on Finance. And indeed, when it was referred to the Committee on Finance, they had to take the leadership of our side to prompt the speaker that if not for anything at all, once it is related to energy matters, the leadership of the Energy Committee should be included in the referral. Now, let me also say that this came under a certificate of urgency, as you know. And initially, on the order paper, this particular bill was not on the original order paper. It was after we were almost at the tail end of the conversation of the day that the order paper addendum was circulated. It was at that point that we got to know that this particular bill was coming to Parliament. And so the first time I saw the memorandum was when, as leaders on the energy side, we were asked to join the Finance Committee for an emergency meeting to consider this particular bill.
All right. Let me talk to the substantive Deputy Minister and come back to you for responses. Honorable Richard Jan Mensah is MP, I believe, for Gomoa West, and also the Deputy Minister for Energy, with a background in the petroleum sector, so you should know a thing or two about this. Honorable Jan Mensah, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, Bernard.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. The Deputy Ranking Member for the Energy Committee says they were not properly consulted before this law was even passed in Parliament. So ab initio, he thinks it was rushed. The minority have also raised many issues about this. They say it's unfair. They say it's worse than the e-levy. Remind us again why government thought this was a good levy to approve.
Thank you, Bernard. On the issue of the minority not being consulted, I think the deputy ranking member obviously knows that before a bill is introduced to Parliament, the committee will be engaged. However, in terms of the timing, as to whether they were given ample timing for engaging them, that I think this was a bill that was introduced under a certificate of urgency. So obviously it will not enjoy the luxury of the usual period that a bill has to go through. And I must say that they were actually consulted.
So when the two committees met, was it unanimous or majority decision that approved this?
I must say, for that meeting, I wasn't in the meeting. But obviously, it would be they would actually resist. They try to resist, obviously, to come out as a majority decision, I guess, because as I said, even when the bill was introduced in Parliament, my brother knows that I was out of the country, even though I was monitoring, but it was introduced under a certificate of urgency on the majority decision.
Be that as
which means that they opposed it.
Wonderful. Be that as it may, the fact that you postponed the implementation from June 9 to June 16 on the basis of the complaint from the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies does suggest some level of speed, because initially you were to implement on the 9th and then you postponed to today, the 16th. Of course, we know that it's no longer happening this week, but you need to consider that in itself, the fact that the oil marketing companies did not feel ready to implement suggests some level of haste, correct?
So, Bernard, I must say that at least you know that I've worked in the industry before. And once the bill is passed, this is not the first time such a bill is passed. I remember vividly in 2014, December, when the special petroleum levy was passed. It actually went through similar arrangements. However, the concerns of the oil marketing companies within the period when the implementation, because it comes with some financial responsibility from their parts. That is how to raise the necessary bank guarantees or raise the necessary cash to be able to give upfront, pay upfront. Whether you have a bank guarantee, you have insurance bond, or you have to pay cash for this, because they are doing the collection on behalf of government, and they also have a responsibility. But their concerns was such that they didn't even know the arrangement. So we thought it was needful that we actually come up with a structure that would be able to support their work. So it was personally, I think the step taken, which was taken by the finance minister, I actually commended him for that step, because there was a need for us to make sure that their concerns is well taken into consideration. And this shows clearly the position of government. Even though government has brought this, government is not in haste to actually push the thing onto Ghanaians, even when it may have some consequential effect on the either the consumer or the industry. So we have introduced it. It's a very good law that we have introduced, and I think that my brother also agrees that the 1 cedi that we have introduced to help us have a very robust energy sector is something that we should all embrace. I know he may actually kick against it because of pressure from party or for political expediency. But if we intend to introduce this, and some quarters, because industry itself was not against the 1 cedi. DS has to do with the implementation and how it's going to affect their operation, and which we considered. Fast forward, I think the discussion is, I was with my brother, and we even discussed this over the weekend, even before, because I was with him in Calgary, Toronto, and this thing came up. We were discussing when we're looking at the international price and then how things are going. So quickly, the finance minister issued a communique to hold the implementation, even though they have earlier communicated that 16th the levy should be implemented. By looking at the market trends, especially over the last few days, the happenings in Iran and then Israel, it actually gave, if you look at the outlook, it actually posted that the international prices are going up. However, whenever international prices is projected to go up, it doesn't necessarily mean that immediately it actually has immediate implication. It may take time for it to actually reflect in the markets. So we thought that we have to study the markets, because we have already communicated that we are going to bring this 1 cedi, and it shouldn't have any adverse impact on consumers or industry. So when we decided to study the market and make sure that, okay, at this point, it would be very ideal for us to push it in. Or at this point, we have to hold it on. And that is exactly what government is just trying to be very responsive and sensitive to the market. And that is why we held it at this point.
Let me ask your colleague what problem he has with that, because this morning I heard him on the radio say that the idea that the NDC government is even citing international developments to justify anything for him is laughable, because he was making reference to the Ukraine-Russia war, that in opposition, the NDC did not agree when NPP used that. So let me just understand his point before I ask that question. Honorable Adomako, I think I heard you this morning make a point like that on our news. If you can clarify, so are you saying that at no point should government use international developments to justify domestic policy decisions? What were you really trying to say?
Well, Bernard, before I go there, I just want to clarify some few points that my colleague made. First of all, he said that we were consulted. That is not true, and the records should reflect same. The only time I saw the memorandum to the bill was when we were rushed to have a meeting with the Finance Committee. If you recall, even on the floor of Parliament, the minority leader, Honorable Adomako, did indicate that such bills normally will go through a certain process, and that he was even surprised to have seen it on the order paper addendum. So yes, when you talk about it being hastily done, you are spot on. We were not consulted. Myself as a deputy ranking member and my ranking member were not consulted on the bill before we saw it for the first time on the floor, even at the committee. So let's clarify that. Even the position of the GPRTU indicates clearly that they were not consulted. A lot of consultation did not go on with this particular bill, and I think we should be very frank with it. Now, the point you made about happenings all over the world, we don't live in an island, and my position still remains that international happenings can have effect on our local economies, and that is why during our time we did indicate that the Russian-Ukraine war, COVID, and all those international happenings were having a toll on our economy. My colleague, my friend, and his colleagues at the time were not prepared to listen to us. And so I was just surprised that within 6 months, the narrative has changed. And now they are telling us that Iran and Israel's situation is having an effect on our fuel situation. Our position has still been, we are very consistent. We believe that, yes, what is happening in Iran and Israel can have effect on our local economy, and we've maintained that position.
Yeah, but Collins, I think the confusion is that for NDC government, they are saying because of the development in the Middle East, they are suspending something that many consumers may consider adverse to them. In your case, you cited Russia-Ukraine to justify the policies that you were implementing, which people did not like. So I think, don't you think you should be commending them? Because they are rather saying, because of what's happening globally, we are rather going to wait. You did not do that.
But I don't think we are speaking at cross purpose. I mean, we are making the same point. If you recall, their point was that they just did not understand why we should use Russian-Ukraine war, and even COVID, the situation with COVID, to justify the economic problem that we had encountered at that time. And so my point is that I am still principled. I think that global issues can have effects on our local economies, just as it's happening now. And the point is that they are now accepting the position we have already made, that whatever happens in the world, because we are not living on an island, it can also have an effect on them. Yes.
Let me find out from the Deputy Minister his response to that. So, Deputy Minister, in opposition, you didn't think we should cite international developments. Now in government, you are citing international developments. What's your comment?
So, in our case, we are looking at the situation, and we just said we want to monitor and see the effects of the conflicts on the market before implementing the levy. In their case, they had actually allowed whatever they intended to implement, either be e-levy, and they didn't also look at the circumstances that would come from the Russia and Ukraine or something, but they went ahead. They didn't look at the circumstances. In our case, we are being careful and monitor the system before we implement the tax or the levy that we have at hand. So it is two things altogether. We acknowledge that the conflict may have some impact on the price, either now or into the future. So we want to see how it impacts before we also know the next step to take. We don't want to actually go ahead with a levy, and let's say tomorrow the prices go so high, even far beyond what we met around 17 cities, and we've also applied 1 city. I think we'll know at that point we'll actually do Ghanaians a much more disservice. So I think the approach taken by government is in the right direction for us to monitor, even though now we are losing so much. What we think that if we had implemented it today, within the next few days, in about a month, it have actually given government close to about a little more than even 500 million Ghana cedis to support our energy sector. But with this, we have to actually take the bullet and then hold and see how the market actually.
So finally, how long are you prepared to wait? Because you yourself and the minister said this was for 2 reasons: to pay energy sector debts and to procure fuel to prevent doomsday. We don't know how long Iran and Israel will keep doing their thing. So are you going to wait indefinitely? And in the meantime, how are you going to keep procuring fuel to power our plants?
So obviously, before we introducing this levy, even though it has been very difficult on the government's budget, we've always tried to get the fuels, but it's actually been put a lot more burden on us. That is why this levy was being introduced. In this instance, government is still monitoring the markets. Even from what we have from today, I've seen that by tomorrow, prices that are going to come up, we will look at how the market actually turns out to be. If it's still, we see it's going down, we would introduce it. It is possible that government can even introduce the levy by tomorrow, looking at how the market fares. If it is such that maybe the market doesn't support it, government will also know the next step to take. So at this point, we've suspended it to monitor the market.
Thank you. Let me end this segment with the former deputy minister. So some people feel like the NPP's opposition is a bit too aggressive because the government has actually suspended the implementation of a levy, which they say is, they are listening, as against the e-levy that people said they didn't want and your government went ahead to implement. So at the least, you should be commending the government instead of criticizing them. What do you have to say?
I think probably they are not listening to themselves. Because if you go back to the budget, and Bernard, I think I would like to refer you to paragraph 264, both 263 and 264. And with your permission, I would like to read what the minister said. He said, Mr. Speaker, this is 263. Government assumed the liability and debt service obligation of ESLA PLC following the bond closure program and subsequent liquidation of ESLA PLC as a result of the domestic debt exchange program, DDEP. Now 264. Consequently, without increasing the levy, and that's the catchword, without increasing the levy, we will also review the Energy Sector Levies Act to consolidate the Energy Debt Recovery Levy, Energy Sector Recovery Levy, and Sanitation Pollution Levy into one levy and use the proceeds to cater for the energy sector shortfalls and service the inherited debt service obligation. This is what they told us in Parliament. If somebody's not listening, then they are not listening to themselves. This is what they told us, that they do not intend to increase the levy. Indeed, Bernard, the memorandum that accompanied the initial bill that was passed in April, right after the budget was read, also indicated that they intend to consolidate the energy sector levies, but they do not intend to increase. So if you come back after 3 months to increase, then you are not listening to yourself, not us. They are rather not listening to themselves.
Okay.
Because what they promised us in the budget and what they are telling us now is completely different.
Thank you, Honorable Collins Adomako Mensah and also Richard Jan Mensah. This is the point of view tonight. We're looking at the fate of the now christened D levy. It's actually a much longer name, Energy Sector Shortfall and Debt Repayment Levy. This is Act 1141 Amendment. When we come back, we'll speak to two independent people. We'll speak to, I call him Dr. Theo Achampong, who is an energy economist, to tell us what is the outlook, how long will the war last, do we know what the effects of the oil price has been so far, and Duncan Amwa from the COPEC on whether the uncertainty about when it will be implemented will affect things. Stay with us.